Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning, everyone. Before starting our presentation today, let me introduce myself. My name is DWI Putriana. You can call me Dela. Now, I am here to discuss a journal entitled Contextual Learning Based on Multicultural Increased Students' Knowledge Competence in Civic Education. Well, ladies and gentlemen, in this presentation, I will discuss the introduction, methods, result and discussion, and finally the conclusion. The first is introduction. In the introduction, it contains the background and study goals of the research. And the first background is focus on the books. Even though the learning carried out is still dominated by conventional system, and the problem lies in the assumption that civic learning material is only rote and repetitive, so that it means focus on book. And second is lack of variation in learning. Learning that is carried out is still using a conventional system, so that it makes learning boring and less meaningful, and students feel bored and have difficulty expressing their ideas. And third is lack of students' ability to build initial knowledge. Learning that is carried out still use a conventional system and focus on book, so that is does not provide a place for students to build initial knowledge with the new idea they have. Students also have difficulty connecting the learning they do with everyday life. And next is study goals of the research. On of study goals of the research to determine the effect of multicultural-based contextual learning on the competence of civic education in SD Gugus 7 South Kuta District, Badung Regency. And next, there is a method. First is participant. Participant in this study were 5 grade students of SD Gugus 7 South Kuta District, Badung Regency. The chosen participants are SD number 4 and 5 Pecatu. Second is design. The research design is a quantitative research with experimental design. In this design, there are 2 groups, namely experimental group and a control group. Each group was given pretest to prove the equality of the 2 groups. A post-test was conducted to determine the student ability in civic knowledge. And next is procedure. The procedure used has 3 steps, namely the experimental preparation step, implementation step of the experiment, and final step of the experiment. The experiment preparation step was carried out by conducting interview with the principal with aim to determine the master of civic learning material in general. Then to determine the class to be in the sample. 2 tests for equality students are given a pretest with an assessment instrument. After that, the sample group that was declared equal was drawn to determine the experimental group and control group. Second step is the implementation step of experiment. Is carried out by providing contextualization plan to the experimental class and providing conventional lesson plans to the control group. And then the RPP is at least 6 times. After being implemented, students are given a post-test which was previously consulted with the teacher. And the last, the final step of the experiment. And the research analysis the data that has been obtained from the implementation of the post-test. And then the results are used to test the predetermined hypothesis. And next is the data collect method. The sampling method used in this research was cluster random sampling. namely is class random. Next is result and discussion. The result of research that have been done by given its treatment 6 times in SD number 4 pecah 2 as an experimental group and SD number 5 pecah 2 as an control group. The recapitulation of the result of post-test data analysis of knowledge competence of civic education student in the experimental group and the control group is in the table below. Based on the descriptive analysis of the knowledge competency data of the class 5 student of the experimental group with the maximum score of 97 and the minimum score of 69. From the data distribution, the mean was 83.85. The variance was 79.24 and the standard deviation was 8.73. Whereas is the control group, the maximum score was 88 and the minimum score which is 63. From the data distribution, the mean is 74.58. The variance is 55.99 and the standard deviation is 7.48. And the knowledge competence value data of our civic education show that groups that are taught through multicultural based contextual learning have a higher average value than groups that are taught using conventional learning. Next is hypothesis testing. In the testing the previous hypothesis, it must fulfill the prerequisite analysis, including the normality test of data distribution and the homogeneity of variance, and the recapitulation of result of the normality in the table below. And based on the normality test of the experimental group, the maximum value was obtained at the maximum value is 0.10. Then the maximum value is compared with the Kolmogorov Smirnov table value with a significant level of 5% is 0.29. So that the comparison of the value smaller than the Kolmogorov Smirnov table value. And the meaning that the distribution of the experimental group data is normally distributed. The result of the normality test of the control group, the data obtained from the normality test of the control group maximum value is 0.10, then the maximum value is 0.27. So that comparison of the maximum value smaller than the Kolmogorov Smirnov table value. And then meaning that the control group is normally distributed. Next, the data in the experimental and control group were normally distributed. So the homogeneity test was then carried out. The homogeneity test is intended to ensure that the difference in the t-test result obtained are true of the difference between group. And the summary of the result, the homogeneity test calculation in the study sample group can be seen in the table below. Based on the calculation of the result of the homogeneity test, the value of F count is 1.36. The value of the table at 5% significant level with the numerator deka in experiment group is 90 and deka in control group is 23. So that the ratio F count smaller than F table is obtained. So the testing the experimental and control group data obtain a homogeneous variance. Based on the prerequisite test, the experimental and control group data result were normally distributed and had homogeneous variance. And the next data collection has meet the prerequisite test analysis so that it can perform hypothesis testing use parametric statistical analysis with Paul variant t-test. And the recapitulation of the t-test result in the two sample group in present in the table below. Based on t-test data, namely t-count is 3.83 and the t-table value dropped the 5 significant level and DK is 42. It shows that the t-table value is 1.68, so that the ratio obtained from the analysis of the value of t-count greater than t-table. It is stated that null is rejected. And from the result obtained, it can be seen that students are more active in learning in experimental group and students understand better learning because the material being studied is related to reality. And the last one is conclusion and significant difference of contextual learning based on multicultural with conventional learning. Based on the result of the analysis and discussion, it is known that there are significant difference between the experimental group and control group in civic knowledge. The experimental group that was taught with a multicultural based learning model had a higher average score than the control class taught using conventional learning models. So it can be concluded that multicultural based contextual learning provides significant change to civic knowledge. So that is the end of our presentation. Thank you so much for your great attention. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.